Picture this. You walk into a theater completely in the dark about what movie is playing, but then you hear the score, the instruments, the harmony, the overall style. Before you even see a frame of the film, the music has already whispered its secrets, hinting at the world you are about to enter. Today, we embark on a journey through the rich world of musical archetypes, those musical patterns that carry extra musical meaning and shape our interpretation of what we hear. Think of them as sonic shorthand, a few notes, a specific texture, or a particular timbre, and suddenly an entire cultural reference unfolds in our minds. We begin by exploring how classical composers embedded these musical archetypes, what musicologists call musical topics, into their works. From pastoral flutes to stormy diminished chords, these elements communicated ideas to their audiences with surprising efficiency. Then we jump into the world of film, where composers adapted and evolved these archetypes into the sonic language of cinema. How does a simple harpsichord cue transport us to 18th century France? Why does a lonely trumpet over galloping rhythm make us think of the Wild West? Film composers have mastered the art of musical archetypes, guiding us through time, place, and mood with just a few well-chosen sounds. Next, we shift gears into the realm of semiotics, examining these archetypes through two influential lenses. First, we consider Charles Sanders Peirce's Anglo-American semiotics, focusing on how musical signs function as icons, indexes, or symbols. Then we take a continental detour through the structuralist approaches of Saussure and Barthes, where meaning is shaped through binary oppositions and cultural constructs. With this foundation in place, we distill the core functions of musical archetypes in film, setting time and place, constructing character identity, supporting narrative arcs, reinforcing genre. By the end of this session, you will not only recognize musical archetypes in action, but also understand how they shape our cinematic experience in ways both subtle and profound. Before we dive into these ideas, I want to highlight that Juan Chata explores them in greater depth with additional examples in his book, Film Music: Cognition to Interpretation. His research does not just explore how sound and image interact, it also unpacks what happens inside our brains when we process these connections. If you have ever wondered why a musical cue can instantly transport you to a time, place, or emotional state, his book offers some eye-opening insights into the cognitive and perceptual machinery behind it. The concept of musical archetypes has long been part of musical discourse, but by drawing on the semiotic theories of Peirce and Saussure, we can better understand how these units of meaning shape interpretation. This timeline situates their ideas within the broader evolution of semiotics and cognitive semiotics, helping us see where they fit in the larger conversation about meaning-making. This figure situates musical archetypes within a broader model of meaning construction, which maps out the different ways we derive meaning from film music, spanning from immediate sensory perception to deeper analytical interpretation. As we have discussed, these mechanisms do not operate in isolation. They intertwine and reinforce one another in shaping our understanding. However, for clarity, we will examine them individually. For centuries, composers and scholars have searched for patterns in music that go beyond mere sound, clues that hint at deeper meanings. These musical archetypes, known as topics or topoi in today's music theoretical discourse, act like cultural shortcuts. Through repeated exposure, listeners learn to associate certain musical gestures with specific emotions, locations, or social settings. A stately march signals authority, a gentle pastoral melody conjures an idyllic countryside, and a growling, distorted guitar screams rebellion. This is the cover of one of the most important volumes dedicated to the study of musical topics. The systematic study of topics began with Ratner, 1980, who drew on music treatises of the 18th and 19th centuries to compile a thesaurus of characteristic figures that encultured listeners of the time would recognize. This work laid the groundwork for numerous scholars to refine and apply topics theory to various repertoires. Building on this tradition, Kofi Agawu, 1991, mapped out what he called a universe of topics, a catalog of the most commonly used musical archetypes in 18th century Western concert music. From the stately march to the playful pastoral and the stormy Sturm und Drang, these topics functioned as a musical vocabulary that composers and audiences alike understood instinctively. Agawu stresses that recognizing musical topics is not automatic, it requires cultural familiarity. Listeners must be schooled in the musical language of the time to pick up on these cues. As he puts it, the primary condition for the perception of topic is listener competence. In other words, an 18th century audience would instantly recognize a hunting call or a tragic lament, while a modern listener might miss these nuances without some historical context. Take a Mozart piano sonata. To our modern ears, it might register as simply classical music, elegant, balanced, and melodic. If we listen a bit more closely, we can start to map its structure. An opening theme in F major, a shift to D minor, a turn towards C major, all neatly unfolding within the familiar exposition development recapitulation form. But for an 18th century listener, this was not just a sequence of key changes. It was a lively musical dialogue, shaped by familiar topics that signaled emotions, settings, and even social class. A graceful minuet would suggest aristocratic elegance. A Sturm und Drang passage, full of diminished chords, would suggest high drama, perhaps even tragedy. Each topical shift carried meaning, guiding the audience through a nuanced, almost theatrical experience. Now, let's hear it again, but this time through the ears of an 18th century listener. Philip Tagg, a scholar of popular music, calls musical archetypes feels, a fitting term for how instantly they trigger emotional and cultural associations. Just as Agawu cataloged the most recognizable topics in 18th century concert music, Tagg compiled a modern equivalent, a collection of musical archetypes that today's audiences instinctively recognize. Whether it is the twang of a spaghetti Western guitar, or the shimmering celesta of Christmas music. These musical archetypes activate our memory and pattern recognition, allowing us to quickly connect musical gestures and styles with meanings based on prior experiences and cultural learning. 18th century listener would instantly recognize the Sturm und Drang or hunt topics in concert music. A modern audience picks up on the musical archetypes cataloged in Tagg's compendium without a second thought. The spaghetti Western twang, the eerie sci-fi theremin, the soaring superhero brass, all of these are deeply embedded in our collective musical vocabulary. And this is where film composers excel. They are hyper-aware of these modern topics because directors often describe music in everyday terms. Give me something heroic, or make it sound mysterious. Composers, in turn, act as translators, drawing from a well-established pool of musical archetypes to craft scores that instantly communicate mood, genre, and narrative intent. As both a composer and a theorist, I have always been fascinated by the surface-level musical markers, such as the subtle shifts in timbre, tempo, melody, mode, and meter, that define a particular topic. Musical markers in some topics, like the spaghetti Western or Twinkling Happy Christmas, are so ingrained in popular culture that they require little explanation. But in other topics, identifying such markers may present more of a challenge. Take head-banging thrash, for instance. To my ear, this archetype is shaped by relentless, almost chaotic drumming with heavy cymbal crashes, unpredictable metric shifts, and a thick, distorted bass line that locks into a repetitive groove. Or consider the football match sing-along, as in European football. Here, the defining features would be a steady duple meter, a roaring crowd, predominantly male voices, and chant-like melodies that sit in a speech-like register, somewhere between shouting and singing. We will revisit the idea of sonic markers when we examine musical archetypes through the lens of continental semiotics. Before we dive into the semiotic side of musical archetypes, let's take a step back and explore how these patterns took shape in film music. Where did they come from? How did certain sounds become so closely tied to specific cultural settings? Understanding their historical evolution will give us a clearer picture of why they work so effectively today. Long before film scores became a Hollywood staple, silent film accompanists had their own playbooks. One of them, Erno Rapé's Encyclopedia of Music for Motion Pictures, 1925, was essentially a Spotify playlist of its day, offering 52 categories of music from mystery to love scenes to sinister plots. Pianists would flip to the right page and in a matter of seconds conjure up the perfect mood for whatever was unfolding on screen. These early catalogs solidified many of the musical archetypes we still associate with film today. Sitting at the piano or organ, the accompanist had to be ready for anything. Right next to the score was a catalog of musical cues, allowing them to pivot instantly, one moment playing a tender love theme, the next switching to frantic chase music. This quick reference system ensured that silent films had a dynamic, ever-shifting musical backdrop that could respond to the drama unfolding on screen. Here's a glimpse into the world of silent film accompaniment. Love Rides the Rails, performed with live organ accompaniment. In this case, the accompanist is improvising rather than following one of the encyclopedic guides used in many theaters at the time. But the principle remains the same. The musician reacts in real time, shaping the film's emotional arc through music, seamlessly shifting moods to match the action on screen. These music anthologies for motion pictures borrowed heavily from the Romantic and post-Romantic concert repertoire. This meant that well-established musical topics, from stormy Wagnerian harmonies to delicate Chopinesque nocturnes, were seamlessly woven into early film music. As a result, these concert hall conventions became the DNA of cinematic scoring, shaping the way composers approached film music even after the silent era faded. Many of the musical archetypes we now associate with film, heroic brass fanfares, sweeping string melodies for romance, ominous low-register tremolos for suspense, trace their roots directly to this era. Let's return to Ogawu's discussion of topics, where he makes a key observation. Topics are musical signs. If topics function as signs, then understanding them requires more than just musical analysis. We need to turn to semiotics. By doing so, we can unpack how these musical figures operate as symbols, carrying meaning beyond their notes and rhythms, shaping interpretation through cultural association and historical context. To fully grasp how musical archetypes function, we will examine them through two major semiotic frameworks, Anglo-American and continental approaches. Each offers a distinct lens for understanding how these archetypes shape our interpretation of music. The Anglo-American perspective, particularly through Peirce's sign typology, focuses on what musical topics are, categorizing them as icons, indexes, or symbols to explain their epistemological foundations. In contrast, the continental perspective is framed within a structuralist paradigm, emphasizing how topics function as part of broader systems of meaning. Thinkers like Saussure and Barthes analyze how these musical signs derive significance from their relationships within a network of contrasts and associations, rather than existing as fixed, standalone symbols. Together, these perspectives provide complementary insights into how musical archetypes communicate meaning and guide interpretation. In simple terms, Peirce's typology classifies signs based on how they relate to what they represent. Icons rely on resemblance. There is a direct similarity between the sign and its meaning, like a stick figure drawing of a person, which visually represents a human form. Indexes are based on association or proximity. One thing points to another, like animal footprints signaling the presence of an animal. Symbols function through learned convention. There is no inherent connection between the sign and its meaning, but through cultural agreement, it becomes understood, like a "do not enter" road sign on the road. Understanding these categories helps us analyze how musical archetypes work as signs, whether through direct imitation, contextual association, or cultural conditioning. From an Anglo-American perspective, musical archetypes are primarily symbols with meanings shaped by cultural conventions. For instance, the 1930s German cabaret archetype immediately evokes a specific historical and social context, just as the Methodist hymn carries strong associations with Protestant church traditions. These meanings are not inherent in the music itself, but are learned through cultural exposure. However, some archetypes also have an iconic component. For example, the sound of a distant bagpipe processed with reverb and compression mimics the way bagpipes naturally sound in an open landscape. Similarly, the gallop topic, fast, repetitive triplets, bears a striking resemblance to the rhythmic pattern of an actual galloping horse. These musical elements work because they physically resemble the real-world sounds they reference. Other archetypes function indexically. They do not imitate the object directly, but are strongly associated with it. Take the funeral march. Slow tempo, minor mode, and a steady, heavy rhythm have been used for centuries in actual funeral processions. Over time, this musical pattern has become an index for death and mourning, even when used outside of a literal funeral setting. This interplay of symbols, icons, and indexes explains why musical archetypes are so effective. Some we recognize through cultural learning, some through resemblance, and others through strong associations built over time. From a continental perspective, musical archetypes function within a signifier-signified relationship, a key concept in structuralist semiotics. To illustrate this, consider the word dog. The signifier is the word itself, dog, just a sequence of letters or sounds. The signified is the concept of a four-legged, domesticated canine that comes to mind when we hear or read the word. Crucially, the word dog does not inherently resemble the animal. It only carries meaning because we have culturally agreed that these sounds or letters correspond to that concept. This is the foundation of Saussurian structuralism, where meaning is not based on direct resemblance, as in an icon, or physical association, as in an index, but rather on social convention and contrast with other words. Dog makes sense partly because it is not cat or wolf. From a continental perspective, musical archetypes function within a signifier-signified relationship, where meaning is derived from a structured system of contrasts rather than inherent properties. Take the funeral march as an example. The signifier is the recognizable musical features: slow tempo, minor mode, steady duple meter, repetitive rhythmic figures, often dotted rhythms, and a low, heavy instrumental texture. The signified is the concept of funeral march, which we instinctively associate with these musical characteristics. Just like the word dog does not naturally resemble a dog, but gains meaning from cultural agreement and contrast, dog is not cat or wolf, the funeral march signifies mourning because it exists in contrast to other musical figures. Later structuralists, such as Umberto Eco, refined Saussure's signifier-signified model by introducing the terms expression plane and content plane. The expression plane corresponds to the signifier, the material aspect of the sign. The content plane corresponds to the signified, the concept or meaning evoked by the sign. This distinction is crucial for understanding connotative semiotics, where the expression plane itself becomes a complete sign, one that contains its own expression and content planes. In other words, a musical sign can operate on multiple levels, embedding meaning within meaning. Let me illustrate this with musical signs. Take the funeral march topic. At the first level of signification, the expression plane consists of its slow tempo, minor mode, duple meter, and heavy processional rhythm. These musical features form a sign that carries a content plane, the immediate meaning of a funeral procession. However, at a second level of signification, this entire funeral march sign, now both an expression and a content plane, becomes an expression plane for a deeper cultural connotation. It may signify mourning and grief, but depending on context, it can also connote broader themes like tragedy or historical gravity. Now let's break down the 4 essential functions of film music archetypes, how they shape our experience of a film. 1. Establish locale and time period, to quickly anchor us in a specific time and place without a single word of exposition. 2. Support character construction and development. Just as costumes and dialogue define a character, so does their musical soundscape. 3. Add subtext to the story, suggesting layers of meaning beyond what is explicitly shown. 4. Indicate genre, most prominently in trailers or main titles, allowing composers to reinforce genre expectations from the very first notes. Let's break these functions down with concrete examples. In each case, I will identify the content plane, the specific musical topic being evoked, the expression plane, the musical features that bring that topic to life. The main title theme of The Last Emperor, for example, introduces an Asian pastoral topic. It features an erhu, a Chinese instrument akin to a violin performing a pentatonic melody, supported by taiko drums, a percussion instrument indigenous to much of Asia. The instrumentation and pitch configuration help place the narrative in the context of China. Some topics help establish with precision both time and place. The main title music of Dangerous Liaisons features a harpsichord, a harp, and a small string ensemble, all performing within a Baroque style, situating the narrative within a well-defined time and place, 18th century Europe. By introducing the archetypical dotted figure of French overtures, the music sets the story more precisely within the French royalty of the time. Some topics indicate time, but instead of pointing to a time period, they suggest a season. The main title music in Home Alone, for instance, introduces a Christmas topic to situate the narrative around late December of some undetermined year. The music opens with an innocent melody in the high register of a celesta outlining a major triad. However, as it adds the archetypical sleigh bells and triangle along with high-pitched woodwinds and strings, it swiftly turns to the parallel minor mode and surreptitiously slinks mischievous string glissandi and descending chromatic lines reminiscent of Tchaikovsky's Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy, evoking a wicked Christmas topic. Here, the time of the year is more relevant than the specific year. Here, I use a single film, 15 minutes, to distill the expressive power of topics in character construction. In the film, 4 characters from divergent socio-cultural worlds cross paths. 2 ex-convicts from Eastern Europe, a laid-back, old-school New York City detective, and a zealous young New York City fire marshal. In the film, when presenting these characters, the musical fabric weaves in archetypical topics to reveal vital facets of their identities. First up, Emil and Oleg arrive in America from Eastern Europe. As they wait in line at customs and passport control, we hear an Eastern European topic. This topic is characterized by the profuse use of the Hungarian minor mode, whose unusual structure contains 4 minor second intervals and 2 augmented second intervals. In combination with other musical markers, such as timbre and instrumental techniques, these features instill an exotic or foreign sound unfamiliar to most Western listeners. The improvisatory gestures also suggest these individuals will improvise to get out of difficult situations.
وانا موجود هون يا بنت الحلال شو اسمي لك بدك قديش خطره هناك قبل الدنيا Next, please.
Чемоданы, вот qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Hangisi ručytis. Next. Tady nemůžeš chodit.
In contrast, a suave noir detective topic introduces worldly wise NYPD detective Eddie Fleming, first seen sobering up by submerging his head in ice water. The music, a smooth jazz, quasi-improvised piece in Dorian mode, is reminiscent of Miles Davis's So What and features a small ensemble comprising Hammond organ, muted trumpet, electric bass, drums. This musical texture pours a chilled, smooth, almost vintage veneer over Fleming's character.
Tomorrow lunch.
Later, a Miami Vice-like topic introduces the young New York City fire marshal, Geordie Warsaw. The music features a metrically offset electric guitar riff over a looped beat machine backdrop, imbuing Geordie with youthful urgency and dynamism. As we have mentioned, the funeral march is a relatively stable topic, traceable centuries back to classical music. This topic, which features a minor mode, dotted rhythms, low register, slow to moderate pace, and duple meter, brings about associations that include death, mourning, and solemnity. In Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the initial sequence takes place in 1944, featuring a de-aged Indiana Jones infiltrating a Nazi-controlled castle. The music in this sequence incorporates a funeral march, which can be read as foreshadowing not only the decline of the Nazi villains, but also Indiana Jones's own journey toward confronting his own mortality. More particular to this moment, it sets the tone for a sequence that blends high-stakes action with historical gravity. And more broadly, John Williams has a history of using this topic to subtly undermine villains, much like the Imperial March in Star Wars for Darth Vader.
Beweg dich! Tonja! Kannst dich später!
Ein Amerikaner, Herr Oberst. Er war am Tor, hat sich als Offizier ausgegeben.
You were alone? Spy. You were alone?
I like to be alone.
In comedies and parodies, the music often over-intensifies the underlying affect by infusing a topic's hyperbolic rendition, capturing a topic's musical essence or most salient features, effectively using the soundtrack to evoke extra musical associations. A scene from Meet the Parents, for example, portrays Greg Fokker as a hero by introducing a version of the heroic military topic in the music, characterized by the use of trumpet and French horns, a marching tempo, duple meter, periodic phrase structure, harmonic progressions based on diatonic triads in root position, profuse melodic intervallic motions in perfect fourths and fifths, kettle drums or cymbals on selected downbeats. The heroic topic in this scene, particularly its hyperbolic rendition, functions not as character construction but as character representation, supporting Greg's short-lived heroic narrative, because an equally epic downfall will soon follow his grand farce.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here on this beautiful day to join Dr. Robert Banks and Deborah Burns in holy matrimony. This is a special day.
It's him! It's him!
See this? What is
My little baby.
The origin of the spaghetti western topic can be traced back to Ennio Morricone's film scores and his collaborations with director Sergio Leone. In particular, his main theme for the good, the bad, and the ugly includes topic-defining markers: galloping rhythms rendered in the percussion or strummed guitars, the minor Aeolian mode, whistling or animal howls, that is, the coyote motif, short phrases with relatively lengthy pauses, twangy guitar, harmonica, bass ocarina, soprano recorder, strings, or choir background textures. In addition, sonic markers providing a stylized rendition of on-screen environments, such as long reverbs suggestive of vast, empty open spaces, and close microphone techniques matching the extreme close-ups, help define the archetypical sound of the spaghetti western topic. The main title theme from The Mandalorian borrows a great number of markers from the spaghetti western topic. It opens with a solo ocarina howling in its mid-register and a short melodic figure reminiscent of the good, the bad, and the ugly, all immersed within a reverb and echo suggestive of a large space. Moments later, a synthesized animal cry and a bell-like hit preface galloping rhythms in the drums, which serve as accompaniment to an Aeolian mode call-and-response melodic exchange between acoustic guitar and low brass. Toward the center part of the theme, as the galloping accompaniment continues, a brief interlude introduces a whistling timbre resembling a theremin, supplying a futuristic aura. Although this TV show is set in the Star Wars story world, ostensibly science fiction, these topical markers narrow and redirect our expectations in a different direction. We will most likely expect a lone, possibly flawed anti-hero with an idiosyncratic moral code. As a result, by weaving archetypical topical markers through the fabric of the main theme, the filmmakers firmly situate The Mandalorian within the spaghetti western genre's legacy.
Jacta gratu! Ubahasa miokala. Achuta mando. Gispi ubahasa miokala.
The functional categories delineated so far are not mutually exclusive. In fact, topics are most effective when simultaneously serving various functions. In Who Framed Roger Rabbit, an animated film noir, the saxophone topic performs multiple functions. This topic, musically characterized by a short and sultry saxophone riff, originated within film noir's smooth jazz sound world, chiefly when introducing the femme fatale. This topic has outlasted the noir genre itself, continuing to permeate other film genres to indicate the presence of a sexually suggestive character or a moment of sexual magnetism between characters. In the film, a sensual saxophone riff consistently signals Roger Rabbit's human-tune wife, Jessica Rabbit. She is a real femme fatale, bodacious, seductive, mysterious, and duplicitous, who claims, "I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way." The saxophone topic in these scenes, thus, indicates the film's genre, defines one of its characters, supports moments of physical attraction between characters in the narrative.
Mr. Valiant. Mr. Valiant. You've got the wrong idea about me, Mr. Valiant. I'm a pawn in this, just like Roger. Can you help me find him? Just name your price, and I'll pay it.
Yeah, I bet you would. You gotta have the rabbits to make the scam work.
No, I love my husband. You've got me all wrong. You don't know how hard it is being a woman looking the way I do.
Yeah, well, you don't know how hard it is being a man looking at a woman looking the way you do.
I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
In a scene from White Chicks, an undercover black cop disguised as a white girl, Tiffany Wilson, joins a masculine black bodybuilder, Latrell Spencer, for an after-party ride. The saxophone topic in the scene helps us and her recognize Latrell's intimate intentions.
Hop in. Take your time. Watch those marshmallows. Ease on him. I won't bite. Unless you ask me to. You are so beautiful.
I'd like to highlight how influential topics are in coloring our perception of a scene. So I will show you the same scene, first with its original soundtrack, and then an altered version with a radically different topic. In The Way of the Dragon, 1972, just before Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris face off in the Colosseum, the music heightens the tension and establishes a quasi-Japanese, almost samurai-like atmosphere. The use of traditional Japanese instruments, such as the koto or possibly a shamisen, combined with the deep, resonant sound of suspended gongs, creates a sense of ritual and gravitas. The sparse texture and deliberate pacing of the music mirror the controlled, anticipatory movements of the fighters, reinforcing the weight of the impending duel. As they prepare for battle, the music gradually recedes, giving way to stretches of silence that magnify every movement, breath, and footstep. When a different musical archetype is introduced into a scene, it can radically reshape how we interpret the narrative. That's all for today. Thank you for listening. And if this talk piqued your interest, Juan Chata's book, Film Music, Cognition to Interpretation, and the companion YouTube site dig much deeper into these ideas.